All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Saturday Morning Mastermind. I'm your host, Samantha Studebaker-Carl, broadcasting to you from beautiful Indiana. And this week, we're going to be continuing our discussion of The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And we are on, if you have the hard copy or paperback, I'm guessing, we are on page 60 with the part that starts with penultimate update Nora had posted before she found herself between life and death. So that's where we're going to start. But before we do that, I'm going to have my friends introduce themselves, and then Catherine's going to read through until we feel like talking about something, and then we'll kind of go from there. How about, guys?
Dan Sisek here in sunny Las Vegas, where we haven't reached 100 degrees yet, which is it's weird because normally by June, within the first week or so of June, we're at like 105, 107, 108, and we haven't reached 100 yet this year. So it's one of our longest periods of not hitting the triple digits. So everybody's loving it except me.
This is Catherine Clement, and we've had your 107-degree weather here, so no worries. It's still making it. All right, here we go. The penultimate update Nora had posted before she found herself between life and death. Do you ever think, how did I end up here? Like you're in a maze and totally lost, and it's all your fault because you were the one who made every turn. And you know that there are many routes that could have helped you out because you hear all the people on the outside of the maze who made it through, and they are laughing and smiling. And sometimes you get a glimpse of them through the hedge, a fleeting shape through the leaves, and they seem so damn happy to have made it. And you don't resent them, but you do resent yourself for not having their ability to work it all out. Do you? Or is this maze just for me? P.S. My cat died. The chessboard. The shelves of the Midnight Library were quite still again, as if their movement had never even been a possibility. Nora sensed they were in a different portion of the library now, not a different room as such, as there seemed to be only one infinitely vast room. It was difficult to tell if she really was in a different part of the library, as though the books were still green, though she seemed closer to a corridor than where she had been. And from here, she could see a glimpse of something new through one of the stacks, an office desk and computer, like a basic makeshift open plan office positioned in the corridor between the aisles. Mrs. Elm wasn't at the office desk. She was sat at a low wooden table right there in front of Nora, and she was playing chess. It was different to how I imagined, said Nora. Mrs. Elm looked like she was halfway through a game. It's hard to predict, isn't it? She asked, looking blankly in front of her as she moved a black bishop across the board to take a white pawn. The things that will make us happy. Mrs. Elm rotated the chessboard through 180 degrees. She was, it appeared, playing against herself. Yes, said Nora, it is. But what happens to her, to me? How does she end up? How do I know? I only know today. I know a lot about today, but I don't know what happens tomorrow. But she'll be there in the bathroom and she won't know how she got there. And have you never walked into a room and wondered what you came in for? Have you never forgotten what you just did? Have you never blanked out or misremembered what you were doing? Yes, but I was there for half an hour in that life. And that other you won't know that. She will remember what you just did and said, but as if she did and said them. Nora let out a deep exhale. Dan wasn't like that. People change, said Mrs. Elm, still looking at the chessboard. Her hand lingered over a bishop. Nora rethought. Or maybe he was like that, and I just didn't see it. So, wondered Mrs. Elm, looking at Nora, what are you feeling? Like I still want to die? I have wanted to die for quite a while. I have carefully calculated that the pain of me living as the bloody disaster that is myself is greater than the pain anyone else will feel if I were to die. In fact, I'm sure it would be a relief. I'm not useful to anyone. I was bad at work. I've disappointed everyone. I'm a waste of a carbon footprint, to be honest. I hurt people. I have no one left, not even poor old Volts, who died because I couldn't look after a cat properly. I want to die. My life is a disaster, and I want it to end. I'm not cut out for living, and there's no point going through all this because I am clearly destined to be unhappy in other lives too. That is just me. I add nothing. I am wallowing in self-pity. I want to die. Mrs. Elm studied Nora hard, as if reading a passage in a book she had read before but had just found it contained a new meaning. Want, she told her in a measured tone, is an interesting word. It means lack. Sometimes if we fill that lack with something else, the original want disappears entirely. Maybe you have a lack problem rather than a want problem. Maybe there is a life that you really want to live. I thought that was it, the one with Dan, but it wasn't. No, it wasn't. But that is just one of your possible lives, and one into infinity is a very small fraction indeed. Every possible life I could live has me in it, so it's not really every possible life. Mrs. Elm wasn't listening. Now, tell me, where do you want to go now? Nowhere, please. Do you need another look at the Book of Regrets? Nora scrunched her nose and gave a minute shake of her head. She remembered the feeling of being suffocated by so much regret. No. What about your cat? What was his name again? Voltaire. It was a bit pretentious, and he wasn't really a pretentious cat, so I just called him Volts for short. Sometimes Voltsy if I was feeling jovial, which was rare, obviously. I couldn't even finalize a name for a cat. Well, you said you were bad at having a cat. What would you have done differently? Nora thought. She had the very real sense that Mrs. Elm was playing some kind of game with her, but she also wanted to see her cat again, and not simply a cat with the same name. In fact, she wanted it more than anything. Okay, I'd like to see the life where I kept Voltaire indoors, my Voltaire. I'd like the life where I didn't try and kill myself and where I was a good cat owner and I didn't let him out onto the road last night. I'd like that life, just for a little while. That life exists, doesn't it? The only way to learn is to live. Nora looked around and found herself lying in her own bed. She checked her watch. It was 1 minute past midnight. She switched on her light. This was her exact life, but it was going to be better because Voltaire was going to be alive in this one. Her real Voltaire. But where was he? Volts? She climbed out of bed. Volts? She looked all over her flat and couldn't find him anywhere. The rain patted against the windows. That much hadn't changed. Her new box of antidepressants was out on the kitchen unit. The electric piano stood by the wall, silent. Voltsy? There was her yucca plant and her 3 tiny potted cacti. There were her bookshelves with exactly the same mix of philosophy books and novels and untried yoga manuals and rock star biographies and pop science books. An old National Geographic with the shark on the cover, and a 5-month-old copy of Elle magazine, which she bought mainly for the Ryan Bailey interview. No new additions in a long time. There was a bowl still full of cat food. She looked everywhere, calling his name. It was only when she went back into her bedroom and looked under the bed that she saw him. Volts! The cat wasn't moving. As her arms weren't long enough to reach him, she moved the bed. Voltsy, come on, Voltsy, she whispered. But the moment she touched his cold body, she knew, and she was flooded with sadness and confusion. She immediately found herself back in the midnight library facing Mrs. Elm, who sat this time in a comfy chair, deeply absorbed in one of the books. I don't understand, Nora told her. Mrs. Elm kept her eyes on the page she was reading. There will be many things you don't understand. I asked for the life in which Voltaire was still alive. Actually, you didn't. What? She put her book down. You asked for the life where you kept him indoors. That is an entirely different thing. Is it? Yes, entirely. You see, if you'd have asked for the life where he was still alive, I would have had to say no. But why? Because it doesn't exist. I thought every life exists, every possible life. You see, it turns out that Voltaire had a serious case of, she read carefully from the book, restrictive cardiomyopathy, a severe case of it, which he was born with and which was destined to cause his heart to go at a young age. But he was hit by a car. There's a difference, Nora, between dying in a road and being hit by a car. In your root life, Voltaire lived longer than almost any other life, except the one you've just encountered, where he died only 3 hours ago. Although he had a tough few early years, the year you had with him was the best of his life. Voltaire has had much worse lives, believe me. You didn't even know his name a moment ago. Now you know he has restrictive cardio, whatever. I knew his name, and it wasn't a moment ago. It was the same moment. Check your watch. Why did you lie? I wasn't lying. I asked you what your cat's name was. I never said I didn't know what your cat's name was. Do you understand the difference? I just wanted you to say his name so that you would feel something. Nora was hot with agitation now. That's even worse. You sent me into that life knowing Volz would be dead, and Volz was dead. So nothing changed. Mrs. Elm's eyes twinkled again. Except you. What do you mean? Well, you don't see yourself as a bad cat owner anymore. You looked after him as well as he could have been looked after. He loved you as much as you loved him, and maybe he didn't want you to see him die. You see, cats know. They understand when their time is up. He went outside because he was going to die, and he knew it. Nora tried to take this in. Now she thought about it. There hadn't been any external signs of damage on her cat's body. She had just jumped to the same conclusion that Ash had jumped to, that a dead cat on the road was probably dead because of the road. And if a surgeon could think that, a mere layperson would think that too. 2 + 2 = car accident. Poor Volz, Nora muttered mournfully. Mrs. Elm smiled like a teacher who saw a lesson being understood. He loved you, Nora. You looked after him as well as anyone could. Go and look at the last page of the Book of Regrets. Nora could see that the book was lying on the floor. She knelt on the floor beside it. I don't want to open it again. Don't worry, it will be safer this time. Just stick to the last page. Once she had flicked to the last page, she saw one of her very last regrets. I was bad at looking after Voltaire. Slowly disappear from the page, the letters fading like retreating strangers in a fog. Nora closed the book before she could feel anything bad happen. So, you see, sometimes regrets aren't based on fact at all. Sometimes regrets are just, she searched for the appropriate term and found it, a load of bullshit. Nora tried to think back to her school days to remember if Mrs. Elm had said the word bullshit before. She was pretty sure she hadn't. But I still don't get why you let me go into that life. If you knew Volz was going to be dead anyway, you could have told me. You could have just told me I wasn't a bad cat owner. Why didn't you? Because, Nora, sometimes the only way to learn is to live. Sounds hard. Take a seat, Mrs. Elm told her. A proper seat. It's not right, you kneeling on the floor. And Nora turned to see a chair behind her that she hadn't noticed before. An antique chair, mahogany and button leather, Edwardian maybe, and with a brass bookstand attached to one arm. Give yourself a moment. Nora sat down. She stared at her watch. No matter how much of a moment she gave herself, it stayed being midnight. I still don't like this. One life of sadness was enough. What is the point of risking more? Fine, Mrs. Elm shrugged. What? Let's do nothing then. You can just stay here in the library with all those lives waiting on the shelves and not choose one. Nora sensed Mrs. Elm was playing some kind of a game, but she went along with it. Fine. So Nora just stood there while Mrs. Elm picked up her book again. It seemed unfair to Nora that Mrs. Elm could read the lives without falling into them. Time went by, although technically, of course, it didn't. Nora could have stayed there forever without getting hungry or thirsty or tired, but she could, it seemed, get bored. As time stood still, Nora's curiosity about the lives around her slowly grew. It turned out to be nearly impossible to stand in a library and not want to pull things from the shelves. Why can't you just give me a life you know is a good one? She said suddenly. That is not how this library works. Nora had another question. Surely in most lives I will be asleep now, won't I? In many, yes. So what happens then? You sleep, and then you wake up in that life. It's nothing to worry about. But if you're nervous, you could try a life where it's another time. What do you mean? Well, it's not nighttime everywhere, is it? What? There are an infinite number of possible universes in which you live. And are you really saying they all exist on Greenwich Mean Time? Of course not, said Nora. She realized she was about to cave in and choose another life. She thought of the humpback whales. She thought of the unanswered message. I wish I had gone to Australia with Izzy. I would like to experience that life. Very good choice. What? It's a very good life? Oh, I didn't say that. I merely feel that you might be getting better at choosing. So it's a bad life? I didn't say that either. And the shelves sped into motion again, then stopped a few seconds afterwards. Oh, yes, there it is, said Mrs. Elm, taking a book from the second to bottom shelf. She recognized it instantly, which was odd, seeing that it looked almost identical to the others around it. She handed it to Nora affectionately, as if it was a birthday gift. There you go. You know what to do. Nora hesitated. What if I'm dead? Sorry? I mean, in another life. There must be other lives in which I died before today. Mrs. Elm looked intrigued. Isn't that what you wanted? Well, yes, but you have died an infinite number of times before today, yes. Car accident, drug overdose, drowning, bout of fatal food poisoning, choking on an apple, choking on a cookie, choking on a vegan hot dog, choking on a non-vegan hot dog. Every illness it was possible for you to catch or contract. You have died in every way you can at any time you could. So I could open a book and just die? No, not instantaneously. As with Voltaire, the only lives available here are, well, lives. I mean, you could die in that life, but you won't have died before you enter that life because this Midnight Library is not one of ghosts. It is not a library of corpses. It is a library of possibility. And death is the opposite of possibility. Understand? I think so. And Nora stared at the book she had been handed, Conifer Green, smooth textured, again embossed with that broad and frustratingly meaningless title, My Life. She opened it and saw a blank page, so she moved to the next page and wondered what was going to happen this time. The swimming pool was a little busier than normal, and then she was there. All right, we'll stop there.
Oh, sounds good. Sounds good. That was a fun part. Or, since I didn't get to finish with you guys on the last chapter, I'll assume that she came to a conclusion she didn't want to be in that last life and thought, okay, I'm over it. Let's get back to getting dead, right? And but then she gets this event where she goes and she thinks that she's been a bad cat owner, and Mrs. Elm sends her back to a life where Voltaire dies on on his own, just under the bed instead of in the street. And then she learns this lesson of, regrets aren't always based in fact. And I think that's a huge message for us to learn there. If we haven't already learned it, I think that's a big one for this book is to learn that regrets a lot of times are based in bullshit, if you will. And, it's interesting if we can kind of look into our lives and think about the things that we're disappointed in about ourselves and maybe examine those things and determine, okay, how much is this? Is it just bullshit that we're telling ourselves about this, that, or the other? And how can we look at it in a different way?
I agree with you on in a lot of aspects on that, because I think what we do is we I just had the word and it left my brain. I hate when that happens. We tend to kind of idolize or over glamorize what we think had we taken a different route of how that would have turned out and and stuff. And I think a lot of times, I think we would find out no matter what life we're in, we're still essentially the same person that we are. I think, and I got that kind of from with Volts, where, once you realize that he was a cat that had this heart issue, and so it wouldn't change that he died. It might have changed how, when, and how it played out. Well, I think that's a little bit of how we can look at our other lives. I don't think the person that we are truly inside, the core person that we are, really would change no matter what life we take. It's just how we, like this moment where if I look back in time, well, maybe if I had decided to move out and on my own way back when I was like 19, 20 and move to Arizona so I could go to ASU after a year, get my residency. But then again, I probably would have had to take on student loans, grants, all this, to get to where I wanted to be, that I kind of got in the same way here. I just worked hard and went to school and paid for it myself. And so, but would I've had a different type of job? Would I have gotten farther? I think, those things are the things that, because we let too much of the minutia of what we hear about other and what we see in other people's lives and and I hate to say this, but what we see through different social media things, I think that's why it's better in some ways that, 30, 40 years ago when we didn't have all these things, we didn't have a lot of the regrets that people have nowadays. I mean, we still had them, but I think it didn't weigh as heavily as it does now too. That's something else I think that we get bombarded with.
Yeah, we bombard ourselves, or at least I do. The other day I was like, my head was feeling so over expanded or something, like there was just, and then I was looking at my activities and what I was doing. And I mean, I never stop learning. Like I'm constantly just absorbing this information about this or that or what, like constantly. And I thought, well, no wonder your damn head is about to explode. Like you keep stuffing shit in there constantly. Like so but that's the era that we live in of technology, where we have this thing called the internet at our fingertips, and I can look up anything that my brain thinks about. I'm like, oh, how does that work? And at like 4 a.m, I'm reading about astrophysicist shit and stuff. It doesn't make any sense. Like I don't understand. But whoever's commanding my avatar down here is evidently very interested in the planet and what goes on here, because I'm I feel driven to constantly flood my brain with information. But I think we do idealize uh, events that have happened in the past. And, it's interesting. I'm reading, let's see, which book does this come out of? Because I read several books at a time. So I think it's one by, oh, what is that dude's name? I'll think of it here in a little bit. We haven't read one of his books, but we probably should. He's very big on like how to reprogram yourself. Um, anyway, he was talking about how our mind and our thoughts and our feelings get in this loop, and we just keep repeating these loops over and over and over. And he gives, practical tips on how to break out of those patterns and stuff, which is good. And we do it so subconsciously that we don't even think about most of the things we do. Like most people don't think about really brushing their teeth when they're doing it or things like that. We just are on autopilot. But I think when we look back and we idealize stuff like that and when we play that loop, then like we were talking about last week, when we it ruins the experience now if we compare back. And it wasn't even the real experience we're comparing it to is the sad part about it. Like the regrets are based on BS. Our fears are primarily based on BS. Our uh our so-called limitations are definitely primarily BS. I mean, there's so much that we tell ourselves we can't do, um, that we absolutely can do. We absolutely can. Like we just have to try it and we have to do it. And, maybe we're not as good at it as somebody else who was born with the gift of that particular thing, but we can still do it. And we fear situations and we think that if a certain situation happens, that's going to be it. It's going to be like the end of the world and we get ourselves all worked up. And it's all chemical. Like it's our thoughts stimulate these chemicals in our body. Like we wouldn't even have any feelings if it wasn't for chemicals and hormones. We wouldn't even. So the thoughts stimulate the chemicals, which stimulate the hormones, which stimulate the feelings. And then that drives us back to the thought. And then there's that loop again. Like we're always in all of these loops chemically, though. And that's how people get so addicted to everything, sugar to drugs to cigarettes to stress even, or like how some people just like to bicker all the time or like always have to have drama all the time. They just kind of feed on that energy. I always felt, as somebody who's worked with energy a lot, I always felt that maybe those people just didn't have access to the light. They do have access, but they didn't know how to access it. So the only way that they could build the energy within themselves was by brewing it up in that kind of a way. You know what I mean? I don't know that that's true or not. I just always kind of suspected that. I always thought that about pedophiles too, that they didn't know how to love. They were injured as a child and then they didn't know how to love as an adult. They only know how to love as a child. So they choose children as partners, if that makes any sense. Like to them, because to them, they don't feel like they're doing any damage to the child, most of them. So, but yeah, we always think that a situation is going to be so good or so bad. And it rarely turns out to be at the extremes that I go to with it anyway. I don't know how about y'all.
Yeah, interesting. You were talking about how a lot of our feelings and a lot of our stuff are, chemically or, the, the basis of that of what you were saying. And I'm going to throw something out here, and I don't know how you guys will take it, but what I wonder what our lives would have been like had that been absent out of our lives. If God, the universe, infinite intelligence, however, just kind of kept, you know, eh, would we all be more robotic like? Would we all be more just, you know, logical, I guess, so to speak? Where me, I tend to analyze everything and play everything out to like the end or in my head will say, okay, well, if this happens, that happens, but then my feelings get carried away in it. And then I think, but then when I go back and look at things from the past, like I was saying, I think I look at, I glamorize it more, but I look at and I compare it to other people who have lived similar lives to the one I might have wanted to take at one point, and seeing where they got to, and maybe that's where we do that. That's how we glamorize it and look at it, try and make it more than what it really would have been. And that's the other fault where we pull in from other lives we've heard about or seen what's happened, or like you have friends that go off and they say, well, I'm going to go do this with my life, and they do that and they get to where they wanted to be, probably with all their struggles, ups, downs, triumphs, failures, that we don't necessarily see, we just hear about. And then we go back and look, well, maybe if I had decided or had the strength to go and do that, and then we add in and build into it rather than trying to just be like, no, these are the decisions I made, this is what I've taken, and not let the bullshit, going back to what you were saying, Catherine, get in there to mess us up. Because I'm going to say it this way, and it may not be the most perfect one, but maybe we are in our perfect life that we are supposed to have lived, in the one we are in now. We just don't think so because of what we think and we see and hear and all the everything out there, and truly trusting that God, the universe, whatever, has the best interest, for us, and does have us in that best life, even though we don't think we're in the best life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, as we grow up, we're programmed with all these, ideas of what a successful life is supposed to look like, so we're set up to have expectations and have, we learn all these ought tos and shoulda, coulda, woulda, blah, 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 all this stuff, and I feel like that's probably one of the biggest disservices that we do to ourselves as humans, is put expectations on ourselves rather than just going into each day, seeing what comes and just having the experience, but instead we're focused on the future, or we're upset about some mistake or some choice or some whatever we did in the past. And so we have this constant struggle between worrying about whether or not we're going to live up to some expectation that we've created for ourselves, or that somebody else is expecting us to live up to, or we're either in a constant striving for something, or we're in a mode of disappointment within ourselves for not having gotten or achieved something, or there's all this mumbo jumbo that we are surrounded with, and it's not just us, it's everybody around us has that going on in their heads. And then we have expectations of each other, and when you're just all this stuff, and rather than just kind of going into it with a sense of, I wonder what's going to happen next, and know in ourselves that we'll be able to handle it in whatever fashion that is necessary at the time, and just letting go of expectations, letting go of these ideas of we have to do or achieve or whatever, and just simply live. And because it's all just BS. It's all perspective and everything that we've been telling ourselves all along. And yeah, I just that's the struggle, right? Because like you said, Catherine, like Joe Dispenza, that's the author you've been reading. I've read some of his stuff too, and so much of it, I mean, a lot of our ailments, whether it's mental or physical or whatever, are self-induced because of either we are doing things that, I don't know, that cause that problem, or we are thinking that whatever we're doing is causing that problem and we're not stopping doing it, or and it's just all this crap we think in our heads, and we can let go of all of that if we want to. And so I've been trying to do that more, is just kind of let go of the shoulda, woulda, coulda crap, and let go of the, what I think I ought to be doing or should do in the future, and trying to take it more day by day. And that can be really hard. Like right now with all my grandchildren here, it's hard for me to not fall in this mode of, oh, I ought to be doing this, that, and the other, business wise or household chore wise or whatever. And but I've got the kids here, and so there's this kind of like constant, like, I really need to spend time with the kids, I really need to do this, how can I do both, how can I get and so there's this like back and forth in my head. And the past few days where the kids are just doing their thing and they're having a good time, and I'm keeping an eye out for them in case they hurt themselves or whatever, and I'm just trying to enjoy the weather and enjoy them, and not stress about whatever gets done, that it's just like, but it's hard, it's so hard to just kind of live in the moment and not stress about all the crap that I stress about, and not beat myself up for not having done such and such, or if I lose my patience with the kids and I yell at them or something, not beating myself up for that, or all the crap that we say to ourselves. And but yet when I can get in those moments where I'm just kind of like here and experiencing, then I'm happy. So it's like we do all this crap to ourselves mentally, and that's what causes our unhappiness, not circumstance, and not the things that we think are causing our unhappiness. It's literally the stuff we tell ourselves about the situation that causes our unhappiness, whatever it is. So it's hard to wrap your head around that. If you've never thought about that kind of a thing, you're like, no, this is what's making me unhappy. But reality is it's the thought about this that's making us unhappy. So that's my thoughts.
Goes back to that book that we did cover, what to say to yourself when you talk to yourself, and how we react and how we put things in perspective. But it's weird because that is so hard to do, because whether we want to admit it or not, I think we are all so very reactionary people that unless we have learned to kind of get to a point where we can sit there and stop ourselves sometimes and say, no, how do I really want to look at this, or how do I really want to approach this? We just go right into the moment, and going back to what we were saying earlier about the chemical and all that, and the chemical aspects that come rushing in, because they're right there, and those feelings are right there and very, prevalent and right there at the forefront of everything. And you sometimes can't turn that off, just it takes practice and hard work sometimes. And I've done it at times where I've had to sit there and say, no, how do I want, or stop a minute when I'm talking, how do I want to say this? How do I want to approach saying this? So I don't say so I say what I want to say, but don't say it in the way it's gonna, and I tell them it may come out, and I'll stop and say it may come out not the way I have it in my head, but hopefully you'll get, but I think that's half the problem is being so caught up in things and the emotions and the feelings, and we forget to stop and say, oh, I have control over how I think about this and what I say to myself, but also how I approach other people too. And that's very hard to do. I've been able to do it a few times, but most of the time I get so caught up in emotion, I just, for lack of a better word, attack. Whether it's me or whether the other person that I'm dealing with or something like that. And I think that's where regrets also come in too, because then when we go back later on, and even though we glamorize some aspects of it, but there are those moments that we really remember and are so vivid in our heads of, oh wow, I didn't mean to do that, or I didn't want to be that person, or then that adds in on top of all the regrets. And then we also, well, that's not the person I want to be, or that's not, is this what this life is? Is this me? Is this going to be this? Well, maybe if I went in this life, this me wouldn't be there. But yeah, I think in actuality, that me would still be there in poor essence.
Yeah. Isn't it? I think that these excuse me, these chapters did, especially the one about Volts, where she went in and he was dead, really emphasize how our thoughts about things, like Mrs. Elm said, can just change our entire the way I mean, it just takes one moment and one thought to change everything about your life. Like this morning, I was sitting at the breakfast table with my dad or kitchen table with my dad, and I said, and just like that, we had a girl. And he said, yep, just like that, we got a girl. We got a girl now in the house, and it just was, everything has changed. Our routines, everything is different. It's a new different life from last week when I was here. And maybe you don't have to do something that dramatic, but you can still change the way you think about, like, if you think that there's something you've always wanted to do in your life, but you've always told yourself you can't do it because of this, that, or whatever, change your thought about that. And I know that now obviously we're not this is just a temporary situation because my son is moving to the area, and so it's not like a long-term thing, but even still, it's oh, I lost my thought where I was going there, and just like that, my thought was gone. And you can do that too, just like that. You could lose your thought too. I think sometimes we need to lose some of our thoughts. I know there's a lot of thoughts of mine that I need to lose. It's funny because I'm one of those people that walks into the room and has no idea why I'm there all the time. And I blame that on the medication that I take, but maybe I'm just switching lives. I don't know. I think this is a pretty perfect life. Oh, I remember what it was. One of my fears in the past has actually been, oh, what would I do? Uh, as many challenges as I faced kind of trying to take care of myself, how would I ever take care of my grandchild if, if I had to? And that was one of my biggest fears. And as it turned out, it wasn't it wasn't scary or fearful at all. It was exciting. And yes, she's not going to be in a school where she's going to get beaten up and get the concussion and, all this other bad stuff that's been going on in her. Like, I was just happy to, like, yay. And so that was a fear that I had for like decades, really, ever since I became more physically challenged. And then in an instant, that fear was gone, just like that, we had a girl. So it's, it just takes a change of a thought. And it's not always like instantaneously when you've been repeating the same thoughts to yourself for 20 years or 40 years or 60 years or whatever it is, you're probably going to have to take some actions and consciously do some things to help change those patterns. They're not just going to magically change by themselves overnight. We're habitual creatures. And, but that doesn't mean, and like you were saying, Samantha, as grandmas, we have, and as parents too, or really teachers or nurses or anything, we have this quote standard in our head of how we're supposed to interact with them. God forbid we get frustrated and raise our voice or, something like that. We beat ourselves up for decades, for that. So we just have to try to, and you mentioned it earlier, Samantha, we're always in the future or in the past, and we really just need to come into the moment and be here now with what's going on here now. And most of the time that's a pretty happy place for me, it really is. When I bring myself to the current moment, it's normally a very peaceful and happy place. And if it's not, I know it will be soon, but but it's worth, to me, it's worth the effort that it takes to do some of these little exercises that they suggest. And that's why we've been doing this show for all these years, because everybody in this group feels like it's worth the effort to try to learn why we do the things we do and learn these hacks on how to make our lives easier and happier and getting along better with people. Because I mean, without conscious effort, I could be one of the most hateful people on the face of the earth. I mean, I have it in me. I know, I've seen her in the mirror. Like my eyes can set things on fire. And but I don't want to be like that. I don't want, it doesn't feel good. I don't want to be at odds. I did want to just mention, I'll quit rambling on that. It's interesting to me because I forget about these human bodies and I get so caught up in the illusion that we live. Because when I speak to my guides and when the guides come in and give me advice about stuff or whatever, it's very Vulcanish. Like there's no emotion. And I forget that it's only the body. The only reason that we experience these emotions is because we have this body that we're in and it works off of these chemicals and things. And I even though I work with health every day, like I forget about that sometimes when I'm so overwhelmed about something. I forget that the only reason I'm feeling so overwhelmed and feel like life should just end for me in this moment is because there's a shitload of chemicals going on in my body right now because of something that I thought. That's all that's going on, really. It's not the end of the world. even though I may try to convince myself that it is. Like, it's really just chemicals. So, um, yeah, we need to cut ourselves a lot of slack, actually. Like, we beat ourselves up on all those thoughts, all those beating ourselves up thoughts. They do things to our bodies, all the sadness that we don't express, the anger, the regrets, all of that we hold in, that does stuff to our body. And we have to reprogram those loops. That's what I'm trying to reprogram right now because I have this pain. And so I'm trying to reprogram the pain loops and get out of that. And I believe that we can do that if we consciously set our minds and reprogram them into better patterns.
It's interesting how, I'm going to say in general, I think how most humans really do want to be the best versions of themselves that they can be, but so many don't understand that it really is a lot of the fight is within, and learning, like you said, one, that there are chemicals and for lack of a better way of saying it, those voices in our head and those things that we hear and listen to, and rather than saying no, you're just crap and stuff trying to distort or get in the way of things, and instead, we get so caught up in what might have been what might be the future or what was the past. I think you hit on something really good. Is sometimes just focusing on the moment and not worrying about all the other things that need to be done, that should be done, that we need to do, because that is part of how life progresses. We do have responsibilities and things, that we need to do, but sometimes just being in those moments are what we need to kind of give ourselves that reprieve, that break, that ability and time to reset, I guess, maybe, and look at things from the perspective here of like what really is important, and that can sit and wait. It will take care of itself when I go and focus on it and take care of it then. And if I focus on this, I'm not going to be so worried about that and worried about those things or worried about what's behind me. I'm going to be in this moment and really get the fullness out of this moment because I'm actively and genuinely focused here and now for whatever it may be that you're doing. And in your case, this weekend with, your grandkids and stuff, that's part of, where, so that way then down the road, you don't go back and you don't have that regret. Sometimes I think, part of dealing with minimizing regret, and one, going back to what we were just talking about, what we say to ourselves, but two, also when we have those opportunities and we are conscious and recognizing that right now, this is the only moment I need to worry about right now and focus on, and take it for whatever it is, whatever you're in the middle of at that point in time, and just figure and believe that when you get to the other things that need to be done and taken care of at their time and place, it'll take care of itself. And then that way, in that moment, you don't look back and say, oh, well, I didn't really get the full enjoyment, or I didn't get the full aspect or the full thing from that moment because I wasn't focused on it. And you don't even remember half of what it is. And then when you look back, we do that glamorizing and overemphasizing, or maybe even underemphasizing, because then we downplay it because well, it wasn't that big of a deal, or and so it gives us that constant loop, going back to what Catherine was saying, that loop that we get in and getting caught up in that rather than getting back on the walkway or even, being on that treadmill, just going and getting back on the actual walk, pathway and moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's also part of it is what are we telling ourselves about what is the best version of ourselves, because is what we're telling ourselves a bunch of BS? Are we maybe already our best version of ourselves if we just sit with ourselves right here in this moment and let go of all the shoulda, woulda, couldas and ought tos and all of that and what we think we should do or whatever. I mean, we don't have to, we aren't obligated to do anything, not from a universal standpoint. Maybe in our, day-to-day lives, we may have obligations, but from a universal, eternal standpoint, we aren't obligated to do anything other than just be. And if we can allow ourselves to just be in the moment, in the right now, and allow ourselves to just be guided by our, I don't know. I mean, we can't not be guided by feelings, obviously, because we're human. But even if we are, even if we're sitting here going, okay, let's just say that the feeling we want to experience more than any other feeling is a sense of love and happiness. And if we're in this moment and we decide that's what we want, and we can just allow for that to guide us in the moment, then that will help us determine what the real thing is that we should be doing, like you said, Dan. And maybe if the thing that we want is that, and we want to spend time with the kids and we want to have a good time with that, then that is what we will do. And if we instead are, maybe that isn't what is the best for us in any given moment. Maybe what we need right in this moment is to feel a sense of peace in a different way. Maybe we want to go out into nature, or maybe our best enjoyment in this moment could be working on some kind of work related project. I mean, we have to allow ourselves to first recognize what it is we actually want in any given moment, and what we want to be guided by, and then allow that to guide us. But so much of the time we are allowing ourselves to be guided by expectations of ourselves, or what we think other people expect of us, or whatever. And but we don't have to do that. But then that's a hard thing to let go of, this concept that really we're not obligated to do anything. All this obligation stuff is human induced. And like you were saying, Catherine, I mean, this is just the body we're in right now. And if we can let go of some of this mumbo jumbo that our bodies are telling us and realize that we're an eternal being, then all the stuff that we think is so freaking serious, we can let go of that, and we can really just be in this moment and decide in this moment what is the most important thing, and like with this, our whole everything that we have going on here with the business and the property and the kids and and living with my son and daughter-in-law, and I mean, there's so much going on, and in any given moment I could have a load of expectations for myself on any aspect of any part of it. I could be all day long, I have all these things pop into my head that I'm like, oh, I got to worry about this, I got to worry about that. There's all these things. I constantly am creating this, like, continually growing, expanding to-do list, and but if I just let go of this idea that I am obligated to do every single possible thing within this lifetime, then I can focus on the stuff that I really want to experience right now. And I don't want to experience stress, and I don't want to experience being angry with anybody. And I don't want to be angry with myself. And I those are a bunch of things I don't want. So I can let go of all this crap that causes those feelings and just focus on the things that I do want, and know also that it's okay if things don't go the way I think they should have gone, my idea of what this should have been or should be or whatever. And because what I want is this moment right here, being with you guys. I could be feeling, oh God, I should be spending time with the grandchildren right now, or I should be outside mowing the yard, or I should be doing all those things. But no, that's not what I want. What I want is to be here right now with you guys and experience this and have these conversations. And some Saturdays I don't. I want to go and do my own thing, and that's okay too. We have to allow ourselves to be okay with that. Yeah, we want to see each other here each week, and we want to. This is kind of like an obligation, if you will, but we're only obligated as much as we want to be. And obviously we keep wanting to be here, so we're here, and this is the important thing to us. So we have to allow ourselves all of that through whatever aspects in our lives, and it's okay to let go of these ideas of what we think our best version of ourselves should be, because it's just a bunch of baloney. And we can decide every moment what baloney we're going to tell ourselves about what we think we should do right now, right? Because even the stuff that I think that is going to make me happy in this moment could be just as much baloney as any other baloney. So with that being said, you guys want to add a final thought before we wrap up today? Add some more baloney to our conversation.
I'm good. Everybody have an awesome week. Love you guys.
I was just going to put in the comments, but I was just going to ask, is it Oscar Mayer bologna or is it some other kind of bologna?
I don't know. Usually in our house, it's the bologna you get at the deli department. That's the kind Chris likes. I don't eat bologna though. So.
Yeah. But I was being, just, being funny.
I know.
But that's, and I'll say one thing. I think you made a good point on the fact that, like, with this, for the most part, we all show up because it's important to us. It's something we love to do. We all love each other and care about each other. And it brings something to all of our lives. One, we do get to spend time together, even if it's like this, even though one of these days we need to all meet up somewhere, and, in person. Two, we do learn, we do grow, we do add respectively to our own lives, and hopefully learn and grow out of it for ourselves. But I think there's, it's just something that, because we're not always here every single time. We all have things come up, and, at that moment, those things are important and they need to be done, and we do it. But there's no animosity, no hurt, no feeling bad when, we all have the things come up. We understand that, and we don't get mad. We don't judge. That's the one thing that I think that's what makes this group so special, is we understand those things, and we don't let that interfere with how important it is for us to be here and everything that comes out of it. So that's just my last little bit.
Awesome, Danny. Thank you. It was funny. my which one is it? It's Christian, my grandson Christian. He came in last night, and all of a sudden he decided he's going to start calling me Sammy. This is the funniest thing. I don't know why that I guess that popped into my head, because I was like, thanks to Danny. And that because he was saying that last night, it was just so funny. I don't know why, but it's these little silly things, that with the kids at this age, it's like, gosh, they try your patience and they wear you out, and you're just like, oh, I'm pulling my hair out every moment, but yet at the same time, then there's these just silly little things that are just so, I don't know, just happy inducing, and it's like any other person calls me Sammy and I want to smack their face, I like punch them in the nose or whatever. And because I was like, my grandma used to call me Sammy, and my dad would call me Sammy, and and so it's funny. He decided he's going to call me just randomly out of the blue. Never heard anybody else call me that before, and he just said it. I was just giggling about it. So it's these little moments that we can embrace in our lives and let go of all this BS that we tell ourselves that is the stuff that makes us miserable, that is the stuff that stresses us out and has us worried and frustrated. God only knows what. And but I love this particular part of this book where it's this message of if we just change the way we think about a situation, then the regret just disappears, like it disappeared in the book of regrets for her. And so we can do the same thing if we just can allow ourselves to do that. So love it, guys. Love you guys. I love you so much, both of you. And for those of you who are out there watching, if you'd love to be involved with some group of people who love talking about stuff and learning about ourselves and talking about books and all of the other mumbo jumbo random baloney that we talk about on this show, then we'd love to have you. You can find us by visiting mindsetmasterycollective.com, or you can look for Mindset Mastery Collective on Facebook or YouTube, or search Saturday Morning Mastermind for that matter, or any one of us. So you'll find us. Anyway, with that, guys, I'm going to wrap it up, and you guys have an awesome, amazing week. We'll see you next time on the Saturday Morning Mastermind. Bye for now.